All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're taking a trip back in time to ancient Greece.
Ooh, sounds exciting.
It is, trust me. We're diving deep into the origins of philosophy itself.
The very beginnings. Wow.
Yep. Our guide for this deep dive is, excerpts from this book I found on Pythagoras.
Pythagoras, huh? So we're talking triangles and equations.
Well, it's more than just math formulas. It's about, what even makes someone a philosopher, not just a scientist.
Ah, I see. So like going beyond just the facts and figures.
Exactly. It's like the ancient Greeks were figuring out how to think about thinking itself. They were moving away from myth and toward, reason and logic.
So they were kind of inventing the scientific method, but also realizing that science can't answer every question.
That's a great way to put it. It's like they were pushing the boundaries of knowledge and wondering what's next. But before we get ahead of ourselves.
Right, let's start at the beginning.
Exactly. And that beginning takes us to Ionia.
Ionia. Now, where is that exactly?
Think modern-day Turkey, along the coast. Picture bustling port cities, marketplaces buzzing with people from all over.
Not exactly what you picture when you think philosophers, right?
Yeah.
More like busy city life than quiet contemplation.
Right. I mean, we're talking Miletus, Ephesus, Samos. These were hubs of trade, cultural exchange, ideas flowing in from everywhere.
So like a melting pot of different cultures and perspectives all bumpy up against each other?
Exactly. And that kind of environment, that clash of ideas, is often where really new thinking emerges.
You need that spark, that challenge to the old ways of seeing things to get those innovative juices flowing.
It reminds me of something Erwin Schrödinger said. You know, the quantum physics guy?
Yeah, no Schrödinger. What do you say?
Well, he claimed that modern science wouldn't even exist without ancient Greek thought. Pretty bold statement, right?
I can see his point, though. The Greeks were really the first to shift from the gods did it to there are laws of nature we can figure out. That's a huge leap in thinking.
It's like they went from stories to theories. It makes you wonder what those early philosophical chats sounded like. Were they debating big ideas while bargaining for olives in the market?
Maybe. But jokes aside, what we do know is that there were a couple of key ideas or postulates that really drove their thinking.
Oh, this sounds important. Lay it on me.
Well, first, they believed that nature operated by necessity, not just randomly or because of the whims of gods.
So, cause and effect, a logical order to the universe.
Exactly. And second, they believed that the human mind could actually understand these laws of nature.
So they were pretty confident in our ability to figure things out, even way back then.
They were. But see, that brings up an interesting point. Because doesn't that assume we're observing the world objectively?
Good point. Maybe we're bringing our own biases and assumptions to the table without even realizing it.
Exactly. And questioning that assumption, that supposed neutrality of the human mind, well, that's where we start to see the line between science and philosophy blur a bit.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So it's not just about observing the world, but about understanding how we observe the world.
You got it. It's meta-thinking, if you will.
Meta-thinking, I like it. So tell me, who were some of the early figures who really embodied this new way of thinking? The OG philosophers, so to speak.
Well, we can't talk about early philosophy without mentioning Thales of Miletus, often considered the first philosopher.
Thales. Okay, I've heard the name, but refresh my memory. What was his big idea?
He famously proposed that water was the fundamental element of the universe.
Wait, seriously, water. I mean, it's important and all, but the universe is made of water.
I know, it sounds a little strange to us now. But remember, this was a radical departure from the prevailing explanations, which were mostly based on mythology.
True. So he was looking for, a unifying principle, a single substance that everything else came from.
Exactly. He was trying to find that underlying building block of reality. And for him, it was water.
I mean, it's a start, right? But was he just, sitting around thinking about water all day, or was he, actually doing stuff?
Oh, Thales was a practical thinker, too. There's this great story about him traveling to Egypt and using geometry to calculate the height of a pyramid.
No way. Right there on the spot.
Yep. The Egyptian priests were totally amazed. Here's this guy from Greece showing them up with his math skills.
That's awesome. I bet that made a few jaws drop.
It's interesting because Aristotle later commented on this, saying that math flourished in Egypt because the priests had leisure time.
So they weren't too busy with, daily grind stuff to actually think and explore.
That's exactly. It suggests that to really push the boundaries of knowledge, you need space to think, to ponder, to just be curious.
So a reminder to all of us to schedule some thinking time into our busy lives. But back to Thales, did everyone just accept this whole water is the answer thing?
Not quite. His student, Anaximander, he wasn't so sure about the water theory.
Oh, so there was already debate and disagreement even back then. What did Anaximander propose instead?
He argued that the fundamental element couldn't be something as specific as water. He thought it had to be something unlimited, undefined, something he called Apeiron.
Apeiron. Okay, now that sounds pretty mysterious. What exactly is it?
It's tricky to pin down, but you can think of it as the boundless, the infinite, the potential from which all things emerge.
So instead of water, it's like the potential to be anything. That's pretty abstract, even for philosophy.
And that's what makes it so interesting. Anaximander was pushing beyond simple explanations, trying to grasp the very nature of existence itself.
It's like he wasn't satisfied with just saying it's water. He wanted to get to the heart of what it means to be, well, anything at all.
Exactly. He was a true pioneer of thought. And get this, he even theorized that the Earth floats unsupported in space.
Whoa, hold on. Way ahead of his time with that one.
Right. It's mind-blowing to think about these early philosophers grappling with such big questions.
They were definitely onto something. So we've got Thales and his water theory, and Anaximander going even deeper with the Apeiron. But where does Pythagoras fit into all of this? The guy who, has a whole theorem named after him.
Ah, yes, Pythagoras. Well, he was born in Samos, but later founded his famous school in Crotona, Italy.
Okay, so he was traveling around spreading the word. What was his big contribution to this whole philosophical journey?
You see, Pythagoras took things in a whole new direction. He was obsessed with numbers, but not just as tools for measurement, as the actual fundamental principle of reality.
Hold on, slow down. I need to process this. He thought that numbers were the basis of reality.
You heard that right. It's a wild idea, isn't it?
Wild is an understatement. It's like he thought the universe was one giant math problem.
And that's precisely where our deep dive into Pythagorean thought begins. Get ready for a wild ride.
I'm already fascinated. All right, I'm still trying to wrap my head around this whole numbers are the foundation of reality thing.
It's a big concept, for sure. It's like, imagine the universe not as, stuff, but as this grand symphony of numbers.
Like a giant cosmic orchestra, but with math equations instead of instruments.
Exactly. Everything from the movement of the planets to the harmony of music, all governed by mathematical ratios and proportions.
So it's not just that we use math to describe the universe, but that math is actually what the universe is made of.
That was the Pythagorean view. A pretty radical departure from the prevailing theories at the time.
Yeah, I mean, Thales was talking about water and Anaximander about this ekron thing.
Right, they were focused on physical substances. But Pythagoras, he went beyond that, saying the real building blocks weren't material at all, but abstract mathematical concepts.
I can see how that would ruffle some feathers in the philosophical world. Didn't Aristotle have some strong opinions about this?
Oh, he definitely did. Aristotle thought the whole idea was, well, kind of backwards.
Like putting the cart before the horse?
Exactly. He believed that numbers were just tools we used to describe the physical world, not the other way around.
So for Aristotle, it was things exist first, then we describe them with numbers.
Right. Well, Pythagoras was more like, numbers are the matrix, man.
Team Aristotle versus Team Pythagoras.
Yeah.
A philosophical battle for the ages. But seriously, that highlights a really important question. Are we trying to understand the world as it is, or are we just imposing our own mental frameworks onto it?
It's a fundamental question that philosophers are still grappling with today.
Yeah.
How much of what we see is actually out there? And how much is our own minds making sense of things?
Deep stuff. But getting back to Pythagoras, it seems like his ideas had a pretty big impact, even if Aristotle wasn't a fan.
They did. In fact, they had a huge influence on Plato and his whole theory of forms.
Oh, right. Plato's forms. Those were like the perfect, unchanging blueprints of everything, right?
Exactly. And guess what Plato thought those forms were based on?
I'm going to take a wild guess and say number.
Bingo. Plato took this Pythagorean idea and ran with it. He saw the world of forms as this realm of perfect mathematical beauty and harmony.
So this idea that started with a group of ancient Greeks ended up shaping Western philosophy for centuries to come.
Absolutely. And it didn't stop there. Think Copernicus, Kepler, even Newton. They were all searching for those mathematical laws that govern the cosmos.
All thanks to Pythagoras and his number obsession. But let's get back to him for a second. This Pythagorean school wasn't just about math class all day, right? It was a whole way of life.
It was. The Pythagorean school was this fascinating mix of rigorous mathematical study, philosophical inquiry, and spiritual practices.
Wait, so they were like ancient Greek math monks? That's wild. What kind of spiritual practices did they have?
Well, they had strict rules about diet, behavior. They believed in reincarnation, the whole nine yards.
Reincarnation, so they thought they'd come back as like a different number in the next life. I'm just kidding. But it's interesting how they applied their mathematical principles to more than just the cosmos, right? Like, they thought it could unlock secrets about ethics and politics.
Absolutely. For them, remember, everything was fundamentally numerical. So they saw justice, for example, as being represented by square numbers.
Square numbers, because they're all nice and balanced.
Exactly. Balance, equality, harmony, those were all key concepts for them.
And music too, right? Weren't they obsessed with the mathematical ratios behind musical harmonies?
They were. They believed that music was a reflection of the mathematical order of the universe.
So they were looking for a universal language, a way to understand the interconnectedness of everything through numbers.
Precisely. It was all about finding those hidden harmonies, those underlying patterns that connected the cosmos, the human soul, and everything in between.
That's a beautiful idea. But here's a question that's been bugging me. If they were so convinced that whole number ratios were the key to the universe, how did they deal with the discovery of irrational numbers?
Ah, yes, the irrational number dilemma. That was a major challenge for the Pythagoreans.
Like finding a crack in their perfect mathematical universe.
You could say that. It challenged their whole worldview, their belief that everything could be expressed through these simple whole number ratios.
I bet there were some tense debates in the Pythagorean school that day. So how did they react? Did they try to sweep it under the rug?
Well, there are stories about them trying to keep it secret, maybe even punishing those who talked about it outside the school.
Talk about math anxiety. But eventually they had to face the music, right? Irrational numbers were out there, whether they liked it or not.
They were. And to their credit, they didn't just ignore them. They developed sophisticated ways of approximating these numbers, even using them in their astronomical calculations.
So they found a way to adapt, to incorporate this new knowledge into their system.
Exactly. They were willing to evolve their thinking, even when it challenged their core beliefs.
It's a good lesson for all of us, I think. Sometimes the universe throws us a curveball, and we have to be open to adjusting our worldview.
A willingness to learn and grow, even when it's uncomfortable. That's the key.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground here, from the Pythagorean theorem to the irrational number crisis. I feel like my brain is doing some serious philosophical calisthenics. Wow, we've really gone deep into the world of Pythagorean thought. From numbers as the foundation of reality to, all those harmonies and ratios.
They really saw the universe in a whole new way, didn't they?
They did, but I'm sure some of our listeners are thinking, okay, that's fascinating, but how does any of this apply to, my everyday life?
Well, one of the biggest takeaways, I think, is the importance of cultivating that sense of wonder and curiosity like the Pythagoreans had.
It's like, don't just accept things at face value. Keep asking questions. Dig deeper.
Exactly. They weren't content with just observing the world. They wanted to understand the why behind the what.
It's that drive to uncover the hidden beauty and order behind everything.
Precisely. And that leads to another important lesson, which is, the importance of questioning assumptions.
Even your own assumptions.
Especially your own assumptions. Remember, the Pythagoreans had this deep commitment to their worldview, but they were still willing to adapt and evolve when confronted with new evidence.
Like with those irrational numbers, they could have just ignored them, but they didn't.
They were open to being wrong, which is so important for growth and learning.
It's like, okay, we might not have all the answers, but let's keep searching, keep refining our understanding.
It's about embracing intellectual humility, recognizing that there's always more to learn.
And that our understanding of the world is always evolving.
Exactly. And I think the Pythagoreans, with their blend of intellectual rigor and that spiritual openness, offer a really powerful model for how to approach life's big questions.
It's that balance of logic and intuition, right? Not being afraid to explore both the rational and the mysterious.
Exactly. But let's go back to something you mentioned earlier about the Pythagoreans seeing connection between math, music, and ethics. That's always fascinated me.
Me too. How did they connect those seemingly different areas?
Well, for them, it all came down to harmony and proportion. They believed that the same mathematical ratios that govern musical harmonies were also reflected in the movements of the planets and in the structure of the human soul.
So it's like math was this universal language, a way to understand the interconnectedness of everything.
Precisely. By studying math and music, They thought we could gain insights into the nature of reality itself, even the principles of a just and harmonious society.
It's like a blueprint for a good life based on mathematical principles. It's a pretty amazing vision.
It is. And even though we might not agree with all of their specific ideas today, I think that emphasis on harmony, proportion, the search for those underlying principles is something we can all learn from.
It's a reminder that there's order and beauty to be found, even in the midst of chaos.
Absolutely. So the Pythagoreans were, in a sense, both scientists and artists, using math to paint a picture of a universe that was both beautiful and meaningful.
And that brings us to a final thought for our listeners. Remember how the Pythagoreans believed numbers were the basis of reality?
Right? That was their core idea.
Well, it makes you wonder, could there be a mathematics of the soul? Like, could our emotions, our thoughts, even our very being be expressed through some kind of hidden numerical code?
Now that's a question worth pondering. Maybe there's a secret formula for happiness, or for finding your purpose.
Or maybe the beauty is in the mystery itself, in that endless quest for knowledge and understanding.
I think that's a great place to leave it. The Pythagorean legacy is all about inspiring us to seek those hidden connections, those underlying patterns that reveal the wonder of the universe.
Well said. And on that note of cosmic mystery, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the world of Pythagoras and the origins of philosophy.
It's been a fascinating journey back in time, exploring the ideas that shaped Western thought.
We hope you've enjoyed it. And remember, keep asking questions, keep searching for those hidden harmonies, and keep diving deep.